Welcome to the Achievement in Sales Virtual Mentoring Series. Today's installment is on client motivations, gaining understanding, and driving results. Our speakers today are myself, Lynn, my co-founder, Tina, and our guest today is Marketing Executive Liz Jones. Welcome.
Thanks.
So if we're going to get started here, we're going to I'll just kick it off. Think like the customer. And so when we're talking about client motivations, thinking like the customer is the most effective and efficient practice to attract and not repel your potential customers. And really a starting point for you is if you already know what to do, right? To connect with your client, you need to spend a few hours putting yourself in their shoes. You know, what do they need? You know, what do they lack? What do they want? Really, what's in it for them? So spend that time to think about those things. When you're asking those questions and you're working through that active discovery, you know, one of the things you're going to be doing is listening for the opportunity, whether you're talking with them one-on-one as a salesperson or whether you've done this exercise ahead of time to try to give yourself a baseline, a foundation for having this dialogue. And as you are talking with your customer and you're listening for the opportunity, it gives you the chance to reframe your message. So you reframe your message to fit their needs, their wants, what they lack. And you're matching your product or service and the benefits to the outcome desired by the client. This is all about how the customer perceives the benefit. Tina, do you have anything to add?
Thanks, Lynn. So I think the main point here, when you're going to think like the customer, you really have to understand what that customer's industry is. I think you need to do a lot of homework and understand the industry and understand your client's position within it, or their company's position within the industry. And also understand what your customer's role is within the organization. And in order to do that, many times it takes a good conversation, asking some very specific questions on what they're currently doing and what's lacking, and what, as you said, Lynn, what may be lacking. Listening, and not so much at this point in time when you're learning about your customer, you're learning about them, and it's not so much about you, the salesperson, that can't wait to tell them all about the wonderful products or services that you have to offer. You need to listen to where they are in order to correctly frame your product or service. Liz?
Yeah, I agree exactly with what Tina said, and I think the closer you can get to understanding your customer needs and keeping a pulse on what things affect them and how their needs change and evolve, you're in a better situation to take advantage of that and provide what they need, and always be their first choice.
All righty. Well, that's terrific. So let's take the next slide here. How will the client benefit and be impacted? So Liz, do you want to get us started here?
Yeah. The first bullet I'd like to talk to or address is think like the customer. In order to think like the customer, salespeople need to talk less about product features and talk more about real life situations to which customers can relate. It's good to ask some questions and find out what is motivating their purchase. The next piece is fill specific needs. The best people know exactly which questions to ask in order to uncover customer needs and to coach them through a sale. One of the most important parts of asking questions is actually listening to the answers potential customers give. when a prospect says something like, we're looking for a product with user-friendly features or something like that, you need to respond with follow-up questions to get at the heart of their needs. For example, you could ask them, like, what does that look like to you? Or user-friendly for which specific users? Or do you have an example of that? And another question that reveals a prospect's needs are, what prompted you to look into our product? So that kind of helps get more at, you know, the specific need. And then the next point is, and what is in it for them? And there are three main points I'd like to discuss to help determine this. The first is to identify the prospect's current dissatisfaction. The greater the dissatisfaction, the higher the urgency. You know, where is their pain? And second, with a good idea of what's wrong in your buyer's world, focus next on what's right, what right looks like. Future promise is really the mental picture that's in the buyer's head. And so the more you could figure out what that is and address that, the closer you're going to be to a sale. And third is cost and fear. Current dissatisfaction and future promise both serve to motivate buyers. But on the other side of the scale, we find you know, the inhibiting factors are cost and fear. And in this category, buyers focus on price, perception of value, fear of making a bad decision, negative past experiences, market conditions, and anything else that holds them back from a buying decision. So buyers really buy when there's a combination of the current dissatisfaction and there's a picture of future promise, and it's greater than, you know, moving forward, their cost and fear. So understanding these components of the prospect's thinking will help you be more successful. Does anybody have anything more to add to that piece?
Yeah, Liz, I would like to add that it's really important to be mindful of your different target markets. For all of us with our products and services, there are normally multiple industries or organizational structures that we're going to potentially be working with or as prospects. And within those, there's different departments, of course, and there's also different stakeholder roles. So individuals could have very different titles in different departments and yet still be a very viable prospect for your product or service. So keeping that all in mind when you're targeting them and communicating with them will be important, because they're going to have different needs, wants, what they lack, what's motivating them. And so I would add that to how the client will benefit and be impacted. Tina, what about you?
Yeah, I like the idea of tying back the product or service back to the goals of the client and their company. And many of us are taught to produce or to talk on the features of something, the features and the benefits. But really, when you're talking, talk about the usage. Talk about how how your product or service can be used to help them, their company, and to help them. Tell a story and be sure that you've tailored it to their particular industry and what others have been doing in their industry to help them.
Yep, I totally agree.
Great. All right. Well, let's move on. Okay, Tina, take us away about buyer motivation.
So I'm going to take the lead on this slide, understanding buyer motivation. And there are two different types of buyers and two different sales cycles that go through. There's business to business, where a business is selling specifically to another business, or it's business to consumer, where you're selling to an individual or to a consumer of that product. And they're very different types of sales. They're very different types of motivations. many of you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have a basis. As long as your food, shelter, and safety is taken care of, then everything else, your social, your relationships, and your ultimate self-fulfillment or self-actualization can be reached. But we all have to feel safe. So there has to be some credibility, whether you're selling business to business or business to consumer. There has to be a level of the confidence that your prospect or client has in you. And then it's the reason that they're going to. Why do they want to buy from you? Is it a measure? Is it for prestige from a consumer standpoint? Is it for pleasure? Is it to be affiliated with a company such as yours? I know one time I worked for one of the largest media companies in the world, and people were just amazed. The prospects that I would call on were just amazed that we would want to do business with them. That was quite a few years ago. I don't know that there's anyone that has that much power any longer. But typically, when you're selling business to business, you're selling solutions, and those solutions can be tied into those solutions can be tied into whether or not that company is able to make money. If you're going to help them with solving a problem for the way in which they go to market. Consumer, when you're going business to consumer, you're looking at benefits and trying to keep people averse to avoid pain and to not take risks.
So that's really interesting, Tina. And so I just for clarification, so if you're trying to avoid, if you want to save money and save time, for instance, where would that fall? And would it be different if you're in a B2B situation or a B2C?
Sure. So thanks, Liz. So if I'm a B2B, so time to market is very important. And if I am selling a solution that is going to be able to cut the time frame delivering to on their delivery, on their production cycle, if I'm able to take that time frame and be able to condense it by a couple of days, that's a couple of days faster that they're able to get to market. That's a couple of days extra that they're going to be able to get their product or service out in the marketplace. That's going to save them on production time. That's going to save them on their employees. They're not going to be spending as much on their employees because we've condensed that time to go to market. So we're making them money on the front end and on the back end. From a consumer standpoint, if you can get that, look at what Amazon has done now. My gosh, you can get something almost the same day, or in some cases you can get it the same day. You have immediate satisfaction, right? And I think that's something now that the consumer is really looking for, is to having that immediate gratification of getting that product or service in their hands. And in a not only a timely manner, but also to be sure that you're not cutting back on the quality, obviously, of that product. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the clarification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that
Lynn,
yeah, I was going to say that it is important to note that for B2B, that B2B motivation often is in that lower quadrant where it's quality, time, price, where you're really looking at the preventing loss, profit or gain, or the avoidance of pain. And that's really a big part of understanding your client's motivation, because it allows you to better position your product or service and to refine your message, for that consumer and for that motivation.
Good point.
Okay. So I was just talking about that, appealing to the buyer motivation. So, I mean, B2B buyers are motivated by what I said, the combination of profit or gain, preventing loss, and also sometimes cause affiliation. If you have a customer who's highly motivated on a corporate level for a specific cause, then that is going to carry through their culture as a motivation. B2C customers and your buyers, they can be motivated by any combination on that sort of the wheel of motivation. And when you're appealing to your buyer's motivation, you want to answer the problem you solve, and you want to identify the motivation or motivations, and then ask, does that motivation have an emotional appeal? Yes or no? So, which motivation or combination of motivations does it have an emotional appeal? And if the answer is yes, then it's like, which emotion? Because you're going to be able to use that when you're having the conversation, the dialogue, the communication, and how you modify your messaging, your presentation. And, working through this exercise really provides insights to direct your client communications. It gives you that foundation that you need to be more successful. So, Liz, any thoughts on appealing to the buyer motivation?
No, I think that wraps that up for this one.
Tina?
So I liked what you said, Lynn, on tailoring. Again, we've got to tailor our solutions to whatever our buyer's motivation is, and that cause, understanding what the cause and the affiliation is for the company. If you're able to address that and talk in their language, I think that is appealing. If we come in and we're talking with a buyer and presenting our product or service, and we're able to be communicating in language that resonates with them, I think that really helps, again, with the credibility and there's a trust factor, I think, that is developed very easily. So I think you wrapped that up very nicely.
Okay. Well, if we talk about emotional triggers, Tina, what can you tell us about emotional triggers?
Boy, these are so true. When we identify the need or service that our potential customer or client may have, we have to establish the right tone in which we communicate with them. Our language is extremely important. Some are more formal than others. And then those visual learnings. So as you get to know a buyer, you're finding out how do they like to communicate. Sometimes you just need to ask them how they best like to communicate. What is the best way for them to learn? Are they a visual learner? Do they like a story? But we have to always tie it back. And we have to keep in mind, it's not about us. It's always about the person that's on the other end of the table. It's the other end of the telephone. It's finding what is that motivation. Is this going to, is this product or service that we have to offer, is this going to help them in their career? Is this going to make them look like a win in their department? What are we doing here? So in order for us to properly communicate and to properly present, we need to really listen and watch and make sure that we're communicating and hearing. It's active conversation, it's active listening to be sure that we stay on point. Lynn, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. In general, I think one thing about emotional triggers that everyone should be mindful of is to avoid negative words, such as no, not, never, because they subconsciously will trigger a fear response, and it can halt your appeal. So there are times when those words are appropriate, but in general, just keep that in mind. Liz, what can you add, share with us about emotional triggers?
Well, I think also just even finding the right time to talk with somebody where they're not in a frenzy and they're not multitasking, so that they're not at a heightened level of distress. And some people like to be spoken, over lunch, or, that's one way to maybe get them out of a discomfort zone with multitasking and lots of deadlines. So that's the only thing that I would add to that component.
Okay, Great. Okay, so matching buyer motivations. Liz, what can you share with us about this?
Yeah. So who and how you help. So typically you carefully choose your segments and tailor the marketing mix as such to individual customer needs. And this helps to invest marketing spending more effectively. There's multiple target markets, and market segmentation is really the process of dividing a broad consumer, normally consisting of existing and potential customers, into subgroups, and that share some sort of shared characteristic. And in segmenting consumer markets, sales and marketing typically look for common characteristics such as shared needs, common interests, similar lifestyles, or even demographic profiles. And in business-to-business marketing, segments can align along, vertical markets like banking, finance, government, education, retail, just to name a few. And again, like Tina mentioned, focusing on solutions. So, and in these cases, it's an opportunity to tailor positive outcomes. So you learn how each segment's different, what motivates the buying decision, who influences the buyers. Is the buying calendar different? For instance, government spending is set like a calendar year. In education, budgets are made kind of May and June, and they're simply not reachable during the summer months. So you don't want to roll out a marketing campaign, for instance, and expect sales to be able to contact people in the summer months. So each segment can have different characteristics that even put the execution of a plan in a different month or in a different order of priority. And once you start having success in a market, then you can get new learnings, and you can gather quotes and happy customers and prospects, and lead with information like, we have had success with a particular client, and that can also help tailor the sales process. Does anybody have any other things to add?
So Liz, I think I'd like to kind of bundle all those together. I think that there are three, in my experience, there are really three reasons that people are going to look to buy. One is financial, another is emotional, and the other is political. I think those three things, there are various versions of them within each. But from a financial standpoint, either they're going to be able to save money or they're going to be able to make more money. From an emotional standpoint, it's finding those awful pain points, right? There's a pain in their current situation, and that they want to alleviate that pain, and they're looking for another solution. But you've got to get down to finding out what that pain point is in order to determine how best to help them through that. And from a political standpoint, sometimes there are buyers that are really looking to move up in the organization, and they're looking for additional status, and perhaps the product or service that they're looking at, or that they're trying to develop with you can really help them look better in their organization's eyes. And how do you do that is by asking a lot of questions. How does this sound? Is this exciting to you? Is this what are you struggling with? How can this product or service help you in this particular situation? So I think it's to identify those three areas, figure out where your buyer falls within that, and then ask lots of questions to find out how you can tailor. Again, we keep talking about tailoring, but we really want to individualize solutions. There's not a one size fits all anymore. in my opinion. Lynn, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole point of this webinar is really to share the concept of making sure that you're really getting into that mindset of the customer and matching their motivations, thinking about the multiple markets, industries, departments, the stakeholder roles, and adjusting their message. I mean, that's what this is all about, so that you can fit your buyer profile better, match their needs and their motivations, and you're going to have more resonance, and you're going to make a connection faster and close the sale faster. So that's what this has all been about. Okay, so if we covered everything, right, guys?
Think so.
I think so.
Well, I want to say thank you. Thank you to all our members and guests. Thank you, Liz, for joining us as our special guest today for this installment of the Achievement in Sales Virtual Mentoring Series, and for being part of the dialogue here at Petite to Queen. If you have a question or would like to suggest topics for discussion, please email us at jointheconversation@petitetoqueen.com.